Okay, so this video I get asked this a lot too lately, and I have had to answer for myself very recently. Before I get into the video, you need to know that I was hired recently as an infrastructure engineer about half a year ago, and I had no Kubernetes experience whatsoever, and I had never made a Docker file in my life. So the last 6 to 8 months, I have been like cramming, using every one of my autodidactic skills to learn Kubernetes, and you can see all of that, and then misery and pain happening on my stream anytime. Just check in, and you'll see me doing Kubernetes stuff usually. That or Go programming or Bash programming or something. But so I have to tell you that before I get into this, because I don't want you to take me as an authority on this. I think you should take this video as if, hey, look, Kubernetes noob has opinions. Okay, so make sure you get more information from people who've been doing it. Nana, it's a tech world with Nana. She seems to be very knowledgeable. I really like her 4-hour video on that. That'd be the one that I would recommend if you want to go get an overview on Kubernetes. But there's some things that they do talk about that are not obvious. You think I'm past the noob stage now? Oh, said the KubeCon presenter. That's very nice of you to say. Thank you, Taniwa. That's very kind. Somebody in the chat actually said something nice to me about me. And they've been monitoring my path as I go. I've got a lot of Linux experience, probably more than 25 years of it. So I think that's why they hired me and paid me all the gobs of money they did, which is crazy compared to the teacher salary I was on before. That's a long story for another day, not right now. So this is my really quick and dirty summary. All these things on the screen are going to be in the show notes, which is a YouTube word, I understand. Down below, I did it. I'm growing. I'm going to be a YouTuber. I want to be a YouTuber one day. You remember me running my first container? Oh, my first container. I was like crying like a little baby. The first time I like grabbed my toes and like did a back bend. What was my first word? I am such a Kubernetes noob. I really am. I am not even going to say that. I still have a lot to learn, but I did help with a production install yesterday, and the person who set up the cluster called me out in praise to my manager and everybody and said, Rob spotted a whole bunch of stuff that we missed while we were doing and fixed some of the problems that we were having. And that's high praise coming from him. So I feel like I'm learning fast, and I'm a fast learner because I'm an autodidact. I believe really strongly in learning how to be a fast learner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So here are Linux is my first word. Linux. No, if you're a Linux user, your first word is fuck. This is YouTube. I can't say that. Or can I? So here's the prereqs. It's very instant. It's very obvious. Okay. You got to learn a Linux Bash command line. And if you want to learn how to learn, there's so many ways to learn it. You can watch my boosts, or you can read William Schott's book, Learning the Linux Command Line, which is free. William Schotts, WILIAMSHOTTS. The other word without the I. And old it covers a lot of stuff if you want to learn. You have to learn Linux. I did another video just today about how to get Linux in Windows the fastest way possible. You should learn the command line. You're not give a shit about the i3 manager or the window manager or any of that stuff. You don't care. You don't even care about the distro. Honestly, you actually should care about the distro a little bit if you want to get into Kubernetes. There's only 3 distros in Kubernetes that really matter in terms of hosting it, right? So you're going to need to learn a Debian-based distro, so Debian or Ubuntu. Those are the biggest ones in cloud. The second biggest one in cloud is Red Hat, and then kind of a distant third is SUSE, and yeah. So those are the main distros that you should concern yourself with. Notice I didn't mention Arch. Arch is not a prerequisite for anything in the professional space except for getting a job for Valve. Okay, that's the only thing. You should avoid Arch like the plague if you're trying to prepare for Kubernetes. Because why? Because in addition to those operating systems, you also need to learn the baseline container operating systems, which are what? Alpine and BusyBox, and Alpine is built on BusyBox, both of which have a bare bones lightweight version of VI that is not NeoVim, and it certainly ain't Vim. It's not Vim and it's not NeoVim. So just skip all that stuff, right? You need to learn VI. So, and I actually talk about this. You need to learn ed and VI and then vim. And by the way, I mean, if you use containers properly, you can do all the editing using Emacs even on your local machine. But the point is, you're going to be in a container at some point. You're going to want to view and search and edit files, and you don't want to just use, cat or whatever. You want to be able to use an editor and get around. And so VI is the thing to learn, not Vim, not NeoVim. Learn VI first. Okay, that's the command line. You need to learn GitHub. I think you need to learn GitHub for source management because this is how you can keep track of stuff as you're doing your learning. A lot of the Kubernetes stuff is related on to continuous integration and continuous deployment, CI/CD, and that stuff is really fundamentally built on Git and GitHub particularly. So you just need to learn it, right? My papers on streams. We should use CIS. CommonMark Markdown. People are like, why the fuck do you have Markdown on here? I'm writing all these notes in CommonMark Markdown. All of the documentation for all of this stuff is written in Markdown, and I am so sick and tired of reading really poorly written documentation because the people that are maintaining the projects, the source code and stuff like that, have no idea how to do Markdown. So learn it. It's not that hard. It'll take you like 30 minutes. And learn CommonMark first, by the way, and hold yourself to that. Don't go crazy, right? There's no HTML, and don't use HTML in it if you can help it. Bash scripting. If you learn Bash scripting, you automatically learn POSIX scripting by default. It's built into it. And if you're afraid of whether you can use it or not, you should learn Bash scripting, and then you should actually add shellcheck to make sure that the stuff you're writing is important. You're going to be writing containers all the time. So you're going to be creating containers. You're going to be managing containers. You're going to be looking through Docker files to see why this image isn't working and how it can be altered and stuff. And that's all scripting. It's all scripting. So you've got to learn it. You've got to learn Bash scripting. Z shell scripting is kind of a K shell version of it. It's like a subset of Bash. But learn Bash. People write their stuff in Bash, which has got the highest amount of power when it comes to shell scripting. It's also the default on Linux. And by learning that, you'll learn all the other stuff as well. It's going to take you a while, but you need to learn it. That, in my opinion, that should be the first language you learn, period. It's a crazy unpopular opinion. People are like, I'm going to Python. Why? There's no Python in any of here. You need to learn Python eventually, but I don't think it's a prereq for learning Kubernetes at all. Learning Bash is, though, in my opinion, because all the instructions are all going to be written in Bash. They're all going to be telling you how to do things and set up clusters and everything. It's all going to be written in Bash. And if you don't know how to read it and make sense of it, I mean, even, anyway, just check into that. JSON and YAML. People make jokes all the time about Kubernetes people being YAML programmers. That's their job. Every single Kubernetes resource is represented in a YAML file, which can also be represented in JSON. YAML is a superset of JSON. You can write JSON in YAML and it works. And you can write it in YAML and it'll work. Okay, so you got to learn those. You have to learn those. These are so critical. And you don't need to learn a fancy linking or anything like that, but you have to learn YAML, like how to do extended text blocks and all that stuff. And NAML is another thing that's coming out too, which is a variation on that. It's a cool thing coming from Chris Nova, but we won't talk about that right now. So Go template language. Now this you're not gonna. This is a true story. I got to tell you something about this. So the guy who hired me, the guy who vetted me before I got hired, I've been a Go programmer since 2014. When I YAML ain't markup language. I know. So, and by the way, the creator of YAML, Igni, one of the creators of YAML, and Greg's a member of our community here. We haven't got Igni on here, but I would really love to talk to him. The guy who invented YAML. Greg actually learned Linux and all this great stuff by pair programming at HP with Igni. I don't mean to dox him, but he said that he's talked about that on the stream before. It's really cool. So Go template language. So true story. The guy that hired me had never coded in Go or anything, and we were just randomly talking about it one day, and I said, that's Go template language, right? And he goes, I didn't know that. So Helm charts, all of the filters that you can do with the Kubernetes commands that have Go template as an option for formatting, they're all using Go template syntax. You need to learn it. It's also, I would suggest you go ahead and go all the way and learn Go. Just as a prereq for Kubernetes, no. But I think you should. You know why? Because you can go look. So for example, I've been learning about the steps of learning Kubernetes, right? I've been learning about the steps that kubeadm does to set up a Kubernetes cluster because I want to do it. I want to understand why it's doing that, right? I'm going through those steps, and the other day I was like, I cannot get a solid answer. There's no documentation on this. All of the official docs are sucky, and nobody's got an answer for me for what is the order that things should be done in order to set up a Kubernetes cluster by hand, the hard way, so to speak. And guess what I did? I went to the source code for the kubeadm command. Kubeadm init is usually the way to do it, right? And then it does all these steps. It does pre-check. It does, the certificate creation and all this stuff. And so it's going through. Yeah, that's one of the meetings. And so it goes through all these steps. Guess what? Because I know how to read Go, and you don't have to be like the world's best Go programmer. Because I know how to read Go, I downloaded. This is why I have GitHub here. Helm charts or Git, everything. I pulled down the Kubernetes source code, opened up the kubeadm file, the command file, it's in command/kubeadm, and read through the Go code, and I saw exactly the steps. And actually I discovered a cool thing. They actually have a different version of the OS exec sub utility. If you know Go, you want to go look at that. It's super cool. It allows you to mock up execution from the command line. Basically, it's a bash version of exec, exec this other command here, but from Go in a way that can be mocked up. It's super cool. So I'm like looking through it going, and because I know how to read Go, I was able to directly and understand what the kubeadm, which is the gospel when it comes to Kubernetes setting up a cluster. So I can see exactly what it did, how it created the cert, whether it checked for the certificate authority, all of these little, crazy steps. So as a prerequisite, I'm not going to say you should learn Go programming before you jump into the Kubernetes world, but it will really, really help you. It will really help you. Every single tool in the cloud native space is written in Go. That is not hyperbole. That is a true statement. Docker, Kubernetes, kubeadm, Helm, Calico, Istio. I could go on and on and on and on. All of that stuff. Go was developed to specifically do cloud native programming before the word cloud native existed at Google. That was its purpose. That's why it was born into being. If you really want to get into Kubernetes and you really want to understand stuff, learn Go. And it can do that in tandem with it or at the side, but you can't escape learning the Go template language. If you want to make a Helm chart or modify a Helm chart, you have to understand Go template language. There's no escaping it. Helm charts are 100% Go template language. Okay. And you have to learn it. It's actually brilliant. And there's an hour-long video of how Rob Pike created the parser for the Go template language. It's one of his magnum opuses. He's so proud of it, about how he did it. You can actually watch that YouTube video. It's really amazing. It's actually one of the better template languages ever invented, because you can just make a niladic function and boom, you can extend the template language in any way you want. That's why Hugo gets all the credit. Hugo's a static site generator written in Go, and it gets all the credit for these really wicked awesome templates that you can do in Go, which is also the reason TJ Hollowaychuk, who made Express and never invented, he actually created a library to use Go's template language rather than create yet another static site generator, because he's like, we got Go templates. Why do we need that? And coming from somebody who invented Express, TJ Hollowaychuk, I think that opinion is pretty substantial. So, okay, next we have the Web Essentials. You just have to use the Web Essentials. It's kind of like kindergarten. You have to know plain old JavaScript and DOM and HTTP, HTML, CSS, and that kind of goes along with networking. You have to know networking and network troubleshooting. If you don't know this, the first time that you go watch, tech, this is how you know. If you don't know if you know enough networking, go watch Tech World with Anna. Fast forward to the section where they talk about networking and services and ingress and stuff like that. And if your brain melts because you don't know what's the difference between an IP and IP forwarding and port, you don't know what a port is. If you can't talk intelligently about basic networking stuff and network troubleshooting, you have no business doing anything with Kubernetes, because Kubernetes requires, ultimately, we were just discussing this the other day actually at work. Kubernetes requires at a minimum a junior network engineering proficiency, as if you could get a job as a junior network engineer before you can even step foot in the Kubernetes administrative space, because Kubernetes does all of its own networking, and it's so intense about the networking and the forwarding and the resolution of DNS and all of its core DNS and all this stuff, that if you don't even have a baseline network knowledge, your brain will melt and you'll get frustrated and you'll leave it. In fact, this is one of the reasons I stopped the boost on day 42, and because we got into networking, I was like, we cannot just lightly touch on this. I need to actually take people deeper into what networking is about, and come up with a way to introduce, common, regular, normal people to that. What's the CIDR? Exactly, Tony. Well, to have fun with me. I had no idea what a CIDR was. I did it. I'm just going to openly admit it. I am not a network engineer. I have a lot of experience. I did not know the terminology. I did not know what a CIDR was. And we have a lot of people like Taniwa and everybody who love, showing off how much they know. And I love it when they do that because I need it. God knows I do. And you don't have to know everything, but networking is hard. Game is hard. The networking game is hard. It's actually not that hard, but it's fun. Network engineers drink CIDR all the time. Yeah, they absolutely do for breakfast, right? But I didn't know the acronym. I knew what it was. The CIDR is just an IP with a slash and a number after that indicates the range of IPs. All right, I knew what it was. I'd used it 1,000 times. Didn't know the fucking acronym. Sue me. I'm self-taught. So yeah, which is another reason, right? So abbreviation for subnet masks. Yeah, that's what I would have used. I actually use the word subnet mask all the time. And like, what's the fucking CIDR? And they go, it's just a subnet mask in another notation. I was like, why didn't you say that like 20 minutes ago? Because they had to invent another fucking acronym. Get used to it. Anyway, so using or creating containers with Docker and Dockerfile. If you don't know about containers, seriously, you do not need to learn Docker Compose. If you know Docker Compose already, though, it won't hurt you. Because when you learn Docker Compose, you can actually use a thing called Compose with a K, and it will convert your Docker Compose, your nice, happy, simple little Docker Compose file, into the 25 Kubernetes resource YAML files that are required to use Kubernetes. Kubernetes is anything but, terse. It's very verbose. And, I actually QMacro is a very, very reputable member of our community who writes a lot. He's a published author in the tech world. He's an SIP instructor, all this kind of thing. He actually thinks that you should learn Docker Compose before you learn Kubernetes, that it's kind of a necessary step. It'll help you understand, you learn Docker and you're like all those volume mounts and stuff that you didn't know how to do, exposed ports and stuff. Now you're putting them in a Docker Compose file in a nice, easy way. And then when you go to Kubernetes world, you can run that same thing through Kustomize and get the YAML files and go, oh, that's what they're calling X and Y and Z and stuff like that. In fact, I should probably reword this. You can learn Docker Compose if you want, then Kustomize to understand. Then Kustomize. So I've got mixed feelings on this. I go back and forth. I am not learning Docker Compose personally because I don't want to. There's only so much room in my head, and sorry, I'm spitting on my mic. I just don't want to do that. Yeah, what we need is for networking. I read TCP/IP Essentials IP Illustrated, TCP/IP Illustrated Volume 2, I think. Is it 1 or 2? And that's how I learned that. That's how I learned most of my networking. I have a lot of networking just to learn, but minimally you got to know what IPs are, you got to know what routing is, you got to know how to set up all of that stuff. And TinyWat's got a link for us to the systems approach. I'll put that link in the show notes, TinyWat, since you posted it. Put related down here. If anybody else has any resources they want to suggest, please let me know. This is kind of a longer video, but I think it's important. Okay, so all of the Kubernetes is based on container orchestration. It's in the name. It's in the main tagline, I guess. And if you don't know containers, which I did not, don't be me. I tried to learn Kubernetes without making a Docker file image or Docker image. How stupid is that? I skipped containers. I never learned containers. I knew of them. I knew what they were about. I could talk about them intelligently. I didn't have a need for them, honestly. I was running my own business for like 8 years. And that started in 2013, right around the same time the containers got really big in the enterprise. And so my knowledge of containers and Kubernetes did not keep up with the industry during that time because I was too busy, running a school with 200, 300 people in it. And making beginner material and writing my own software. I actually learned a lot of Go during that time. It's funny, when I found JQ, it was like, this is awesome. And I realize now that JQ was a product of the whole movement towards, from cloud native. It was kind of a result of it. JQ is a little utility for parsing and querying JSON like you're using SQL. Pretty cool. Kind of the modern SED for JSON. Anyway, so this is what I would suggest is the minimum. If you don't know Linux and the bash command, there are a lot of people who do. When I put Linux command line here instead of Linux, because there are a lot of really knowledgeable people who know Kubernetes and containers who have no idea how to use. They don't run baseline desktop Linux. They run Macs, or Windows, WSL2, which is Linux. But there's a lot of container people. There's a lot of DevOps, container Kubernetes people who use Macs. And that's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. But you do need to learn the bash command line, because you're going to be digging apart, containers and what they do and how they run and stuff. And that's all. The containerization uses something called C groups and other thing. Containerization itself was invented by Linux. The reason that the Cloud Native Foundation is a sub foundation of the Linux Foundation is because you can't have, you can, BSD people are going to throw stuff at me, but you can really, the modern cloud native revolution is built on Linux C groups specifically, and C groups v2, which is coming out. So having Linux knowledge is like really, really, really important. The more you can learn about Linux, which I recommend, having a desktop. I didn't put it as a prereq, but I really think that you should shift over to using Linux as your daily driver, because you're just going to, all of that knowledge is just going to snowball, and it's going to help you out when you're doing your cloud native and Kubernetes stuff. And that includes things like tmux and yesterday when we were doing the production upgrade, my coworker, who I deeply respect, he's very skilled, opened up a putty session and opened up 15 putty tabs to do his stuff. And the first time that he and others saw me, when I shared my Slack screen, the first time that they saw me split my tmux window into multiple parts and use watch kgetpod and getnode, and saw me in real time watching whether I could log in or not, and whether or not our certs had been fucked up. They said, "Oh, can you start up that like sudo dashboard and watch that while I'm doing these other changes over here?" So did he do the job without tmux? Yeah. Was I able to visualize and help out more because I had tmux knowledge? Yes. So it's not a prereq, but the more you become used to using the terminal, particularly managing your real estate with something like tmux, and not just that, but your connection state. That's what multiplexers are really for. They're to maintain a connection to a system even when you get disconnected, right? So tmux and links and tmux and screen and stuff like that, or you have two purposes: managing screen real estate and terminal real estate. People ask me what my window manager is, and I say tmux, and they go, "That's not a window manager." I'm like, I think it might be. And two, maintaining a connection. So you can actually, it's not common for a node or something to have tmux on it, but if you put tmux on your machines, you can actually go over to those machines. It's more probable you're going to be running tmux locally, and you're going to make a remote connection into a worker node or something, and another connection over here in another window, et cetera, et cetera. But learning those skills, learning the terminal desktop skills, becoming a terminal desktop master, a terminal master, I guess, terminal native, terminal shell, shell native, whatever you want to call it, is a thing, and you should do that. So this is a long one, but I'm going to keep going. Here's a quick overview in the prioritized order. So if you're trying to organize your learning in a way that kind of layers, and I believe in progressive learning, that layers, there's a repetition in it so that I repeat things I already know, and then I come back at it and try it again in a different way, and in a different way, and a different way. So you use tmux, good. So this layering, this is my current strategy for this. This is my personal strategy. If you see anything wrong with it, please let me know. So first of all, you need to get familiar with the Kubernetes components and architecture. That means reading about them. You gotta read the Kubernetes IO and maybe watch Tech World from Nana comes to mind. She just has an amazing overview, that 4 hours. But that's assuming you have Linux knowledge already. You're going to be confused if you don't. If you don't have Linux and networking knowledge, you watch that video, you'll go like, what? So don't. Get familiar with the resources. Use Kind to deploy a simple app. Kind is a single node Kubernetes cluster. It's an entire fully compliant cluster that runs on your computer, and it uses Docker. And you probably are using Docker Desktop. You can watch the video how to use Windows how to use Linux and Windows. I cover that. Why I think Docker Desktop or something akin to that is good. Minikube is the same thing. If you do Minikube, you don't need Docker Desktop. It comes with Docker built in. It's a VM. Minikube is the VM. It's not anymore. Now it runs in Docker too. So these things are basically Kubernetes clusters that run on your computer, so you can get used to using it. How do you interact with the thing? How do you see your logs and all of that stuff? And then the first thing to this is a long time. These bullet points do not encapsulate how much time it takes you to learn how to use these things, right? But then the next phase, and I'm kind of here now, is when you want to kind of get your Kubernetes administrator, you kind of need to dive deeply into stuff. And to do that, there's nothing better than kubeadm. And by the way, I'm gonna make a caveat, a point out right here. I want to really warn you. At about this time, some Kubernetes pro is going to come to you and say, you need to do Kelsey Hightower's tutorial on Kubernetes, and I'm going to strongly advise you against that. Not only is it out of date and just fucking dead wrong in many places, but it has you install the executables for the components rather than the actual Kubernetes components that kubeadm installs. I think recommending the doing it the hard way tutorial is one of the greatest disservices to a beginner that can ever happen. And I wish I had never done it because it confused the hell out of me. And if I had gone with kubeadm instead and studied what it does and frankly its source code, I would have been way farther along because that's the hard way. You want to do it the real hard way? Read into the kubeadm. And Kelsey does take PRs, I know, and he's a great human being, an amazing biography. I'm not attacking him. I'm attacking that horrible tutorial. And sure, he takes PRs, but I don't want to. You have to just throw the whole thing out. It's completely useless. Plus, it's completely focused on Google Cloud. Why would you want to do that? I don't want to build a Google. I want to build on-prem, right? If you want to do cloud, and that comes in here. Okay, so use kubeadm init to deploy a cluster in a VirtualBox app. And practice deploying your own without Minikube. These do all that magic for you. Now you're doing your own magic, right? But more importantly, you need to study what it is doing. Study what those phases are. And this is where I am right now, by the way. And then you have you can do kubeadm init, but this time try to deploy it into a Docker as with a host container. It's tough to do that. I've got a tutorial of my own, a lab of my own to do that. And you can actually, if you want to watch any of that, I do. Code learning Kubernetes all the time. I have streams of me like suffering through it if you want to watch. So, the kubeadm init phase. So this is if you add the word phase to the kubeadm command, this will incrementally add. You can actually run each phase, pre-check and certs and all this stuff. You can run each of the phases one at a time, and that will give you, in my opinion, I haven't done this yet, but that will give you a sense of what has to happen. What are the steps that have to happen to make a Kubernetes cluster exist? And I believe it'll help. And then ultimately, you can deploy a single node cluster using phases the hard way. To me, the hard way is don't use kubeadm. Follow the steps that you now understand because you read the source code for kubeadm and you follow the init, and you're doing the exact same thing that kubeadm does, but now you're doing it yourself. That means you're setting up your own certificate authority. That means you're installing etcd from scratch. You're doing all of these things that you understand because you read them from the kubeadm phase documentation or from the code itself, which I strongly recommend you do. Go dig into kubeadm, read what it does, understand it, and then do those things by yourself. Don't use kubeadm. Not anywhere near being able to do that. But to me, that's the best hard way to do it because it's not some person's outdated interpretation of the steps. It's the actual steps that have been approved by the Kubernetes project. And so you can recreate those steps and look at the source code and potentially contribute someday. Maybe you'll find a problem and you can be able to contribute some source code. I plan to do that eventually. So use kubeadm to deploy multi-node clusters without using a cloud provider. At some point, you're going to need to know how to do a cloud provider. Most of the cloud provider solutions are just turnkey. You click a thing, you get it. I'm using DigitalOcean right now to deploy a kind of a live community platform that I kind of want to design, and that's my plan there. Deploy multi-node cluster in the cloud without kubeadm. I don't know that I would ever do this. I have it listed here because I'm thinking about it. Use kubeadm to deploy multi-node cluster on-prem on your own hardware. This is something, I have all the hardware for this, and I plan to do this, and I'm going to use kubeadm. But then the ultimate one would be to do it the hard way on-prem with your own hardware with no kubeadm. Honestly, if you can do that, if you can pull that off, you're a god. You're like a Kubernetes god at that point. Because you have had to do everything that kubeadm did by hand and understand it. That means you have a deep knowledge of certificates. I almost want to list here that you have a pre-knowledge of certificates. Maybe somebody would agree with that. I kind of feel like you need to have how to manage certificates and know what they are as a prereq to getting into Kubernetes. You definitely have to have it before you get into the kubeadm stuff. Kubernetes is full of certificates, and one of the places that I feel that I am really failing right now is I don't remember how certificates are managed. I have a general knowledge of it, which is just really dangerous. I'm going to put it, I think you need to have a deep understanding of TLS certificates. Actually, it's not that. It's X509 certificates, right? Did I get that right? Did I get that right? See, my certificate knowledge is so bad. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's X509 certificates. At a time before, let me tell you of a time before kubeadm existed. Says Taniwa. No, there's, is it X509 on openssl? Yeah. Of X.509, correct me if I'm wrong. And openssl, and I would suggest use openssl and not all the other ones that the Kubernetes IO suggests. OpenSSL is hands down the standard for certificate creation and administration. The land before kubeadm. No, dude, good grandpa. Tony has told us publicly he was one of the keynote speakers at KubeCon. So yeah, we definitely have some expertise in the house. Like, oh, you sound. The person that asked this question just said, "Are you experienced in Kubernetes yourself? It seems like you have some working knowledge on the topic." I work for Docker and help create it. It says Taniwa with humbly after telling us about his Willie Nelson concert. I don't know anybody who name drops more than you, Mr. Taniwa. I love you here. I love having you here. He name drops like every day. I know that person. I met that person. I had lunch with that person yesterday. So we have some really amazing people in our community. I've said this over and over again. This community, it's not about me. It is about me. It's always about me. But it's the people here. I mean, Taniwa was watching me from an absolute baby. That's why it's so flattering to have him say, "No, you've come a long way," because the guy fucking knows what he's talking about. He'll write the code. Not to mention, presents on it at KubeCon, blah, blah, blah. So we have some great people here in the community. We're here to help you if you're trying to learn all this stuff and suffer with us. Oh my God, there's so much suffering. Because you know what? It never goes away. This is what you have to learn. I'm going to do it. In fact, I even have a shortcut for this. Landscape. Yep, here it comes. This has become a meme in the cloud native world. Oh, what do you need? What do I need to learn for Kubernetes? This is what you need. Is it any wonder? How's it going, Het? Oh man, thanks for the bits. And this stuff changes like every week. You know what? They actually, if you're struggling to try to keep track of this shit, join the club. You thought the web world was moving fast? Hold my beer, web fatigue world. Framework fatigue. People invented framework fatigue. Hold my beer while I try to, keep up with telling you all the shit that you're gonna. Okay, it's not just DevOps, right? Watch out for that word, by the way. It'll get you in trouble. You get pegged as a DevOps person instead of an infrastructure engineer, and you're definitely not a DevOps person. You're an infrastructure engineer who happens to be interested in DevOps and Kubernetes. It's a little caveat in the culture right now, just so you know. But and so you gotta learn all this stuff. It's like, which one should I learn? Should I learn this one or this one or this one? Yeah, and so it's like, yeah, stay on Linux, of course. Stay on learning Linux, and virtual machines and stuff. And gRPC, which is fucking amazing. I really love that. There's just so many fun things here to learn. So it's got all of the appeal of Linux. The appeal for me about Linux is the same thing that turns off somebody like Linus Does Tech. There's too much to learn. There's always more to learn. It's never done. There's no one way to do it. There's like 1,000 ways to do it, and you have to find the one best way to do it. And it's a challenge to keep up. And you get good money. Do you know what the average salary is for a certified Kubernetes person? $175,000 in America. That's a true story. I'll provide the link in the description. The average salary, not beginning salary, the average salary for somebody who knows this, not to mention all of Linux in order to do it, and junior engineering skills as well on top of all of that. When you finally learn all of that stuff and you get a job doing it, the average salary is $175,000. Average. And if you learn Go along the way in order to make sense of it, it's a steep fucking learning curve. I've suggested it's good for most really intelligent people. It's going, the high end is well double that. Yeah. When I had an executive offer me $250,000 when they thought I knew this in writing. And I was tutoring their child, and they thought I knew all of this stuff, and I was just getting my feet wet, but they didn't know better. And I had an interview and everything. I know a guy who does this up, sets this up, CTO stuff, regular interviews for half million. It depends on where you are. So if you, like, I'm not saying you're going to do it for the money, and it's definitely hard work. I'm not saying you're going to shy away from it, but it is worth learning. It is definitely worth learning. And, Wall Street Journal did a thing on this about how they can't find anybody because there's so many things you have to learn. This is conflicting. It feels like it's the way to go, but it feels like an egg that until it hatches would be nice, stuck for 13 hours. Okay, so I believe I was with you. This is why I didn't dive in 2014. Really, I was like, because it wasn't even, they weren't even sure. They weren't even sure if Kubernetes was going to be the winner. It was like, okay, which one am I going to learn? And I'm like betting on a race here. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job of betting on tech races, and paddling fast before the wave hits, and cleaning up, catching the wave while I watch everybody else get dunked. It just sucks to do that, but that's the tech world. I didn't make that rule up, man. That's just the tech world. So what are you going to learn here? Like, is Helm going to win out over some of these other ones that are hatching right here, right? There's a lot of hatching going on in like the extra stuff. The place that there's not hatching going on is Kubernetes. I mean, there's a little bit of challenge from Nomad right now, but Kubernetes is a given. It's a given. So learning it is not going to ever count against you unless they throw all of Kubernetes out. And believe me, the tech industry has done crazier things. It's possible. It's possible that they might do that, but I doubt it. Given the entrenched nature of Kubernetes in the enterprise, I don't think that's ever going to happen. This would be a page of the encyclopedia of Kubernetes. Yeah, you need a job. So anyway, when you finish these 12 steps, you'll need another 12-step program to get you through it. You'll easily pass any certification exam and would be immediately able to deploy Kubernetes flavor to any potential customer organization. Notice, by the way, that there's no direct learning about virtual machines here. Virtual machines, in terms of setting up machines to host Kubernetes stuff, is related, but ultimately it's a different area. In fact, in my enterprise, we have over 200,000 nodes. If we were actually public, we would be, the company I work for right now would be one of the top 5 computing, CPU powerhouses in the world, but they're not public, so I can't tell you more about it. But they have over 200,000 nodes in their cluster for high performance machine learning. And most of them are still in batch, which means that they are just containers running on VMs, and there's no Kubernetes in it. And so they're undergoing a transformation. A lot of companies are, and they're trying to move to a Kubernetes architecture. They can't find people to do it. And a lot of them are turning to Google or to Amazon or to Microsoft or whoever, Linode, to do it for them because they don't want to deal with it. But a lot of these companies are required to do it on-prem, which means they pay people like you and me to help them do that, to help them make the migration and move their Jupyter Hubs, images from the, over into Jupyter Hub and Kubernetes and that kind of thing. I've done a lot of streaming on that, and to make that transition. So that's the landscape. That's the career landscape for this. And then you have security on all top of that. There was a massive security vulnerability in the default ingress controller that came out this week, which it would hand over all your passwords and certificates to anybody who knows how to compose it properly. So there's a huge security landscape and footprint kind of here as well that you also have to understand. There's just a lot, and it's a lot. I'm not saying it's not, but I think it's relatively rewarding. I'll tell you something though. I have to take a break. Default Nginx ingress. Yep, I said that. Did I not say the default Nginx ingress? No, Kubernetes default ingress is Nginx ingress, and Minikube. It's the default. I have 3 sources for that, Mister. Did I not say it that way? Yeah. Kubernetes doesn't have the security flaw. The default component for doing ingress, which is routing traffic from the outside world into the Kubernetes cluster, is something called Nginx ingress, and it has a massive security flaw in it right now. If you are not doing something about it today, you need to. It's like really a big deal. But if you don't, I mean, the keynotes at DEF CON, I understand. I wasn't there. The keynotes, it's the default in Minikube. I've heard 2 people tell me it's the default, and one of them's a YouTuber, so they obviously know. And the other one went into why Minikube uses ingress, Nginx ingress as the default as well. I don't think Calico is the default CNI, but we'll talk about it. All of this stuff like made my eyes glaze over like 8 months ago, so it can be done. I know Minikube isn't all Kubernetes, but I actually had somebody else say that the default. Okay, Nginx. Let me restate. Nginx ingress is the only ingress controller under the Kubernetes project itself. True or false? That's what I was told. And that's what I was told, and I might be wrong. And we got authorities here, so you can correct me. I am open to correction if I get it wrong. So let me know. You don't need to worry about that. Don't worry. This is not about that. You want to just learn how to get started, right? I know it seems like a lot to learn. And as I'm learning it, you'll see this on stream. I get so burned out from just trying to learn Kubernetes that I have to take a break and actually write software or play a game or just riff on, do voices for the Contact movie like I did last night or something. But not as important. Yeah, I think that's the one. It's actually what I was told about that is that that's the project that's managed under the Kubernetes officially. That it was the official, not the default, but the official project supported by the Kubernetes project. Maybe they were just overstating that it's not a sandbox project or something. I don't know. So by the way, you do have a little bit of solace here in this crazy ass. You don't really have to learn all the things that are here. You can focus with the mature and the graduated projects. Those are the ones that are going to be around a while. And then, of course, there's the certificates you can get to try to cover all this. Normally, I'm not a certificates guy, and neither are most of the experts that I've met. None of them have certificates, but I'm actually pursuing a certificate in Cloud Native, mostly because I want to see if it covers the whole thing, keep them honest, and I want to share. I want to share for those others who might want to do it. Having a cert in the Cloud Native space is going to be much more valuable than most other certs, kind of like in the security sense, like the OSCP certs, because there is so much to learn, and it's so hard to test that you actually know what you're talking about. It's one of those things, right? So it does kind of lend itself to getting a cert more than other things. Like if you're gonna just learn coding, you could fill your GitHub full of code and participation in open source projects. You could prove without a single piece of paper that you know what you're doing. In this particular crazy landscape, it's really hard to prove you know what you're doing. How are you going to do it? There's 2 ways. 1, do the piece of paper. 2, follow these steps and be able to talk intelligently about the cluster that you're running at home on hardware, whether it's Raspberry Pi or old Mac Minis or whatever. I think that that's the best way to demonstrate you know what you're talking about. But don't shy away from applying for jobs if you have really strong, like, Het is in here, Het Tanis is in here. He's got really, really amazingly strong Unix skills and Linux and Unix skills and administration and stuff. He's the kind of guy that would hide like this. By the way, Het, are you still there? We'll talk later. They're actually looking for somebody on my team. My contractor is like calling me every month, asking for me to send really, really knowledgeable Unix and Linux people to him because they don't care. They want to teach him Kubernetes. They want to get him in the right place. Yeah. So if there's anybody out there hearing this who actually has that, and I don't get a cut, I'm not talking about that. If there's anybody who actually has really, really strong, like enterprise level Linux administration, Unix administration skills, who wants to get into this, you could do what I did and end up getting a job doing it without knowing it because they cannot find anybody. Do you do contracts too, Taniwa? Do you? Seriously, I'm going to put you in contact with my recruiter because, you know what? Fuck, I hadn't even thought of that. Hey, Chris just went live. Chris Nova just went live. We should go watch her. Okay, I'm going to stop making a video now. Go watch somebody else. Go watch Chris Nova. She just came on. I'm actually going to rate her. So Chris Nova is one of the big names in the developer world in the Kubernetes landscape, and she's doing crazy, amazing things. Among many others. There's a lot of other people that are doing it. So no, seriously, I'm very serious. If you want to, Tanya, honestly, talk to me. We're looking for a super senior architect it's a different role than what I was talking about. Somebody who just knows Linux and wants to do Kubernetes. They're hiring tons of people who have baseline system administration SRE skills that are willing to learn Kubernetes on the job. There's tons of work for those people, and there's companies that can't find anybody, so they're willing to pay you for that job as long as you're willing to learn it. And I imagine there's companies out there who'll pay for the certification and everything. So if you are one of these people, by the way, please contact me, because I have a recruiter with Tech Systems who's looking for people, and he's great. The second thing is I'm feeling undercut of a boss. And the second thing is I got my job through another very, very senior person who actually put me in front of the interview process for this thing, and they said, yeah, the guy knows his shit, but he doesn't know Kubernetes. So they took a chance, and I think it's safe to say they're happy they did. I mean, based on the feedback I've been getting lately. But you gotta put the time in. So I'm not kidding. If you do, we're also looking for a very, 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 very senior person who could come in and make like high level architecture decisions about Kubernetes. These are the people that are making $500,000 at least a year. They're coming in, and if they're not working specifically for a company. They bounce around as contractors because they're making really high level enterprise decisions, helping companies make these decisions. So I tell you what, enterprises throw cash at such people right now because they cannot make sense of what's going down. If you actually have an architectural sense of that stuff, and you have the wherewithal to actually talk, to executives and CTOs and pass the bullshit filters from the engineers, you can make crazy money. And the world is really needs it right now. And we're actually looking for somebody specifically to do that. So I'm just going to put a plug in there right now. We need a person on our team that has that knowledge. And a unicorn, as the recruiter called them. So anyway, yeah. And there's again, in the stream here, I'm going to plug it. There are many people in the stream are getting jobs all the time by making friendships with other people in the stream, in the community, I should say. And we actually had somebody who just got a data science job last week, and we put it in the news. If you actually get a job because of something you learned here, indirectly or otherwise, please let me know, and I'll put you in the news. And because that's the primary purpose of the stream, is to get people employable, specifically employable operations skills, more of the back end kind of cloud native security kind of thing, as opposed to development. And I love development. I was a developer for years and years, but this is one of the really, there's a lot of web developers out there, and there's still a high demand for it. But I tell you what, there's not a lot of people that are taking on the task of learning all this really great stuff. So if you love living on the terminal command line, if you love a good challenge, if you like the hackery feel of all of this, you might actually be a cloud native engineer or an infrastructure engineer, and you would prefer that. Yes, I like making web pages and apps and stuff like that when I need one, but this infrastructure stuff really speaks to me. And there's a lot of other people that speaks to as well. If that's you, let me know. Come join our community. Yeah. I built a company on mentorship, and this particular live stream and this YouTube channel and everything is the next iteration of that community. I no longer do skillstack.io as a one-on-one mentoring sort of system. So my time is dedicated to this. The difference is that I now have a full-time job from which to draw on to provide real-time mentoring expertise and lessons learned from the industry. I'm not some talking head who's up here telling you what to do based on some theory. This is shit that I run into and fail with constantly on stream. And frankly, I think that's how you should learn. It's basically a macro version of pair programming. You're just pair programming and pair learning with me as I fuck up and have all of our amazing people who know better than me tell me the way I should be doing it. And we fight about it and come up with the right answer. So I actually might end up making this my intro video on my YouTube video, because this is really, really where you're going to see most of my time. Jenny was joking with me the other day, one of my favorite community members, and she said we should just change this into, was it Jenny who said it? Who said we should change this into declarative architecture stream or something like that. I think it might have been Infinity. Yeah, I can't remember who it was. It was somebody else. But anyway, so this is lately my stream, when I'm not like being in a just chatting mood, which is totally irrelevant, and just having fun, because I got to do that. If you don't do that, I'm gonna go fucking crazy. Honestly, I'm gonna go crazy because there's so much to learn. So, so we relax in here too. But when we get down to business, we suffer and sweat together, and very literally, actually, sometimes I'm like literally sweating on stream. Um, so that we can learn it. So, but it's almost always entirely dedicated to Kubernetes. At one point, if you had seen this thing, you would have been saying, "Oh, this stream is all about security." At one point, when I started in 2020, end of 2020, I was doing OSCP certification and getting ready for that. I thought that was the career path I was going to go after moving out of SkillStack. And I'm so glad that I went with the cloud native route, the infrastructure engineering route, because I can still do the hacking and stuff. I can still do all that, but I don't have to write the reports and everything. As a career option, this is in dire need. It pays crazy gobs of money. It has no end in sight. It's super, super challenging. The people are amazing. They're more like Guilfoyle and less like Dinesh. And if you don't know that reference, go watch Silicon Valley or read my about page. And so this is why I'm sort of advertising and pushing for this career path for people, because I think it's so far it's been phenomenally rewarding and challenging and fun and profitable. And not only that, but the skills that I learned actually allow me to make really kick-ass applications so that I can do my own thing, and including creating a cluster that searches the whole world for pen testing, makes money on all those, script kiddie type of vulnerabilities that are out there. There's so many things you can do with these skill set that don't have anything to do with making gobs of money for another employer. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Kubernetes hacking challenge. Absolutely. Yeah, we need more of that, right? I apparently Hack the Box in the gang. I have a friend that works at Hack the Box now. The guy who got me to stream, frankly, he's working at Hack the Box these days. And he was saying that they're working on a bunch of material for hacking Kubernetes. So you got to learn Kubernetes before you can hack it. And it's one of these areas that's rife with opportunity to hack, because why? It's so fucking complex. The fact that it's so complex, to be a hacker, you just have to understand it. And somebody does an ingress incorrect or something like that, boom, you're in. So what's that? You have all the flags from the last one? Yeah. Yeah. Or you do the Kubernetes CTF challenges. Do they have some? Are they on Hack the Box? Are they open source? There's a bunch of stuff. Yeah. I mean, there's just so many opportunities, so many things to do here. Yeah. Great information, the whole new world that I didn't know about. I think I might want to move towards this direction. I had somebody ask me the other day, and I'll end on this. I had somebody ask me the other day because they were struggling because they're out of a job, and they said, this was in the live stream. They're running a live one at KubeCon. Oh my God. A CTF kind of thing for Kubernetes. Interesting. Somebody asked me, they said, do you really think, how solid are you on that year recommendation? And this was somebody who was like literally zero skill with Linux on the command line at all, asking, how long is this going to take? And if you're out of a job, that's a really core question. And I don't know the answer. That answer is for you to come up with. You have to establish how much time you can put in, what's your velocity, what's your ability to digest this stuff, how many autodidactic skills do you have already? In fact, I'm going to put that here. Become an autodidact. If you don't even know what the word means, then you're not an autodidact. You actually might be. You probably are. You'll go figure it out. In fact, you probably already searched it because you are one. Being in this space means you got to learn very quickly, and you have to have all the stuff I did about links and research and everything. It's all being driven by the baseline foundational skill of being able to learn intensely and quickly, and through failure, and through setting things up, and through networking. All of these undocumented ways of learning are core to this career. If you don't know how to do it, you have to learn that. And you can't make an estimate about how long something's going to take you until you know how much time it takes you to learn or read or type or research. I mean, these are things that you have to answer for yourself. And anybody that tells you it's going to take a certain amount of time, don't trust them. They're immediately lying to you because they haven't even asked you what your abilities are. There's a bunch of learn this in 10 days and shit. Just run the fuck away from that stuff. Just seriously, people, anything that's trying to make something sound like it's really easy, go away from that thing. I'm not trying to make this hard. What I'm saying is, It might be easy, but it depends on you. I can't answer the question for you. You have to answer the question for yourself. You have to say, how much time can I put in? It's like you're developing your own training plan for triathlon or something like I used to do. You have to establish how much time you have to put in, what's your weaknesses, where you have to focus, how much where are you going to do this, what your ultimate goal is, what angle do you want on it. You have to make all those decisions first, and then you need to put together your own plan and come up with your own timeline. Okay, so I'm aim for simple instead of easy. And this is one of the reasons that, for example, I dropped Docker Compose from my plan. I don't need it. I would rather learn to use, the rather verbose, Kubernetes resource YAML files rather than Docker Compose. It's just a distraction for me. That was a personal decision. But maybe you already have that. So you're like, oh man, I'm going to use Kustomize. I'm going to leverage my knowledge of this thing to find this other thing out. The whole focus of my community and this stream and the last 15 years of my life has been helping people navigate their own learning for their own desires and purposes. If you're a hobbyist, maybe you want to screw around with Rust and make a game in it, or maybe you want, what I'm saying? It's like, it depends on what you're doing. But my priority that I've stated openly is for me to get the skills so that I can continue to help others get those skills, and so that I can continue to be a productive member of my current team at work. And if that happens to sync up with what you want to do, and it might not, but if it does, we're here for you on that, so we can help you. Aim for simplicity. Yep. Aim for simple instead of easy. Sometimes devs use Compose to speed up their dev workflow. I actually think I would probably do it, but it's a trade-off. You implement a Compose instead of Kubernetes assumptions. Absolutely. That's one of the reasons I might not do that particular thing. But those kind of questions are here. This has probably been more like a half an hour video, but I feel like it's important. I think I'm going to actually kind of bring up the priority on this particular video, because this has become what this community and stream is about, for better or worse. So it's probably good that you know that up front. We're not going to talk about how to do Python programming until I have to do it for Jupyter, because it's broken and it's an application that's running on Kubernetes. So that'll help give people a sense of what this thing's about. I'm actually going to drop now, and I'm going to go run and make sure, boy, let me just end the stream with this. Make absolutely sure you find a way to find balance in your life, because you're going to get so much cortisol built up in your system from the frustration of learning this stuff and everything that goes there. Either frustration or excitement. Like me, I get cortisol for both. And it makes me unhealthy. I get like really excited, right? And then I get really angry, and then all that energy ends up building up as fat inside of me, and cortisol, and you have to find a way. I do yoga, and I'm going to go outside and so at some point I actually might do a live stream where I take you with me, kind of improve that for y'all. Thank you. If you have any other questions, please stick them in the Discord, and I'll try to get to the AMA eventually. We have AMAs on Sunday and Wednesday, and I try to make videos out of the AMAs out there. So other than that, cloud native instead of security, that was my decision. Yeah, because it's just as fun. And security, ask the security people. 50% of the time, security people are writing reports. It's an office job. They're using software that already exists. They're not writing software. Very tiny percentage of security people are actually doing the cool thing that they see hackers doing. Yeah. They're usually not doing this.
No way.
No way.
I'm getting hacked.
A port scan?
I'm getting hacked. A port scan? People think they want to be a hacker. They might want to be a cloud native engineer.
Please confirm.
Ooh. Oh, wait.
Fight the planet! Fight the planet!
I had to. You might actually like Kubernetes. It feels like you're hacking because there's so many crazy things going on, and you have to use Nmap to see if your programs are working the right way. Though there's a definite mystique in it. Yeah, and it's fun. There's no doubt. But you can do it on the side, right? You don't have to be paid to do it unless you want to. It's up to you. If I were to do hacking, I would do the Gamoza route. I would try to find the one the 0 days and stuff like that. Hack the Gibson, man. Yeah. Bye. I'll talk to y'all later.